This is Drive Mumbai with Erica.
Okay, here's where we take you sun chasing this evening with Anuradha Goyal. She's an author, a blogger, and a podcaster. Listen in. So I'm really keen for you to share some top local travel destinations. I noticed that you did, a really big travel to Odisha. A little bit about that experience.
Odisha will remain very special for multiple reasons, but now because that was the one big last travel I did before pandemic. So I spent about 10 days in Odisha, though we did the regular popular trail that people do in Odisha. We ended up seeing a lot of temples, some of the famous ones like Konark and Puri, but also some of the lesser knowns like the Chaunsat Yogini temple at Hirapur or Biraja Devi Shakti Peeth at Jajpur, which is little away from Bhubaneswar.
Okay.
We discovered some of the art villages there where everybody is engaged in making paintings and all sorts of other artworks. But the most fascinating part of Odisha that I discovered that I really didn't know much about was two of its national parks. One of the national parks that we visited first is called Bhitarkanika National Park, which is known for saltwater crocodiles.
Right.
Most of the crocodiles that we see are not really saltwater crocodiles, but this is one rare place in India where you find saltwater crocodiles and you see them in like tons.
Okay.
So you take these boats, you board a boat from the park, and then from the boat on the either side of the narrow water channels that you go through, you see them sunbathing and you see them from, a just born kind of crocodiles to 25 feet long ones. And they keep growing. And do you know that crocodiles keep growing? So as they keep growing in size as well. They don't stop like we humans stop at, at 16, 18. We stop growing in size. But they don't.
Which was the largest one that you saw?
25, 30 feet.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. And they all have names and the boatmen will tell you their names. And then there is a small museum there which has a skeleton of a dead crocodile, so you can admire the whole anatomy and the engineering bit. It almost looks like somebody has put it together, but it's actually the real skeleton of a crocodile.
I hope you enjoyed that. To get more from Anuradha Goyal, check out her podcast. It's called Detours with Anuradha Goyal. Also, her website is IndiTales.com. You can enjoy more of her travel adventures there. This is Drive Mumbai.
94.3. This is Drive Mumbai with Erica.
Well, let's take you sun chasing next with Anuradha Goyal from IndiTales.com. She's also a travel author and a podcaster. Listen in. So here's the thing, our Radio 1 Sun Chasers are also fabulous foodies, and I noticed that you spoke a lot about Indian street food in one of your blogs. So we'd love to know if you could, pick your favorite, and what are some of the unusual ones that we should sample and that you have tried out in your travels?
To pick up one street food is very, very difficult. I love the street food in Lucknow, where you get the best of pani puri. You have this pani puri wala who gives you like 25 different flavors of water.
I'm
And,
salivating.
Yes, and he does, and he doesn't have a shop. He just sells on a bicycle.
Oh, wow.
And then you have seasonal delights like, if it's winters, you have these roasted peanuts and you can flavor them with anything.
Yes.
Or the sabudana vada that you get at the base of Amboli waterfalls. I don't know if you know Amboli waterfalls is something that comes up during the peak monsoons.
Yeah.
And we often visit it, and at the base of the biggest waterfall, you get the best of sabudana vadas.
Amazing.
And of course you go to MP, you get the poha and jalebi. You go to Rajasthan, you get the onion kachoris. You go to Calcutta, you get puchkas. You go to Odisha, you get dahi vada. What not. I mean, you really can't place them one above the other. Just savor whatever you get wherever.
I agree. I so agree. And we actually missed that this time, in Mumbai city. My gosh, because of the pandemic. Street food, of course, is not available, at least not in my area. So I'm desperately missing it.
It's not available anywhere.
So we know you've been keeping yourself really busy, and there's a book out, a little bit about it, and where we can get a hold of it.
So we published our first ebook. In fact, it's a book which is available both in English and Hindi. It's called Unusual Temples of India, and in Hindi it's called Bharat Ke Anokhe Mandir. It talks about 15 very unusual temples. Either the deity is very unusual, or the practices are very unusual, or something which you don't see normally at temples or anywhere else. So each of the story is a fascinating story from a different corner of India. So do check it out. It's available on Amazon worldwide.
I do hope you enjoy that. You can catch a podcast. It's called Detours with Anuradha Goyal. This is Drive Mumbai. Travel Stories with Anuradha Goyal from IndiTales.com. You can check out a podcast. It's called Detours with Anuradha Goyal on all streaming platforms. This is Drive Mumbai.
94.3. This is Drive Mumbai with Erica.
Okay, here we go. Let's go sun chasing with Anuradha Goyal from IndiTales.com. Listen in. This one I have to talk to you about. Diamonds are a girl's best friend, one of my favorite, but you did a very interesting podcast about the most famous diamonds from India to the world. A little bit about that.
So I met this author who's written a book called Diamond in My Palm. And this book, though a fictional account, it traces the journey of 12 most important diamonds in the world and where they are at the moment. Most of them are in the Western world, including the Kohinoor,
Right.
which we know is in the England.
Right. When I saw that on the crown, the Kohinoor, I was so tempted to wanted to crack open the case, take it back to India.
You know, the 12 pounds that I paid to see it hurts me the most. So anyway, we know about Kohinoor, but we do not know about the other 11 diamonds. So this author has done a lot of research, and he traces that most of these diamonds potentially came from the mines of Golconda, which would be current day Hyderabad or Amravati in Andhra Pradesh.
Right.
So most of them trace their journey from there through various kings and various dynasties and various travelers. It has traveled all around the world. And he talks about how a lot of travelers who we thought were like mere travelers traveling fascinated by India were actually spies looking for these diamonds.
Wow. Okay.
And also some, of course, some of the superstitions associated with these diamonds. It is said that Kohinoor, whoever had it, was destroyed. This author tells me that it is good if it is with women. All the men who had it were destroyed, but when the women had it, they prospered.
Right. Okay.
And in England, Kohinoor is in the Queen's crown.
Right.
Okay, so that was fascinating, and of course there are a lot of stories of each of the diamonds and how it was taken out of India, and a final superstition that wherever these diamonds are, prosperity is.
Right. Okay. Let's bring those diamonds back home.
Yes.
I do hope you enjoy that. You can get more of her adventures with her podcast. It's called Detours with Anuradha Goyal. This is 94.3 Radio 1, One World, your station.
94.3. This is Drive Mumbai with Erica.
Okay, here's where we take you sun chasing this evening with Anuradha Goyal from IndiTales.com. Listen in. So, Anuradha, we know that the Namaste greeting is the most accepted and most used traditional Indian greeting, not just in our country, but around the world as well. But you have interestingly listed 20 more ways to greet in India. Can you share that with us today?
Yes, it's very interesting. I wrote this post about a year back. And, I have been attending a lot of conferences, speaking at a lot of conferences, meeting a whole lot of strangers. And I figured out that Namaste is the most hygienic way to greet somebody.
Especially in the pandemic era.
Yes, and come pandemic, and it became the norm.
Yeah.
But having said that, when you travel across India, Namaste is acceptable anywhere in India. It's reciprocated very well. But every region has their own greeting, most of which do not involve touching.
Right.
All of them involve saying it.
Okay.
Most of the times with folded hands, but if you don't fold hands, that's perfect. You just say that.
Right.
So, for example, in Ladakh, they say Jule.
Jule. I've heard that.
Yeah. But it's also a very culturally rooted thing. So, for example, on the banks of Narmada River, they'll always say Narmade Har.
Okay.
You know, so it's always, or in the banks of Ganga, it's always Har Har Gange.
Okay.
Okay. And a very interesting greeting I heard was in Bikaner, where they say Jai Jai. So if I happen to meet you, I'll say Jai Jai Erika.
Ah,
okay.
okay.
So it's Jai Jai. So it's always, wishing you victory.
Right, of course. I know that there's a Vanakkam in Tamil Nadu.
Yes. So Vanakkam and Namaste, they mean the same thing.
Right.
I've explained it in my post. So Vanakkam and Namaste, Namaskar, Pranam, they all mean more or less the same thing. So there's another set of greetings that comes from the popular deity in that region.
Right.
So for example, when you go in Ayodhya, it's always Sitaram, Sitaram, or Ram Ram, or Jai Siya Ram.
Okay.
When you go to Gujarat, it's always Jai Shri Krishna.
Right.
When you go to Braj Bhumi, you can't say anything. You have to say Radhe Radhe.
Okay.
Okay. When you go to Punjab, you have to say Sat Sri Akal.
Yeah.
Among the Jains, they say Jai Jinendra.
Right.
Okay. Or the Ayyappa followers, they say Swami Sharanam.
Right.
So it is very rooted. The greetings are very rooted in that place, wherever you are.
So we know you've been keeping yourself really busy, and there's a book out, a little bit about it, and where we can get a hold of it.
So we published our first ebook. In fact, it's a book which is available both in English and Hindi. It's called Unusual Temples of India, and in Hindi it's called Bharat Ke Anokhe Mandir. It talks about 15 very unusual temples. Either the deity is very unusual, or the practices are very unusual, or something which you don't see normally at temples or anywhere else. So each of the story is a fascinating story from a different corner of India. So do check it out. It's available on Amazon worldwide.
I do hope you enjoy that. You can catch a podcast. It's called Detours with Anuradha Goyal. This is Drive Mumbai. I hope you enjoyed those travel adventures with Anuradha Goyal. Do check a podcast out. It's Detours with Anuradha Goyal on all podcast streaming platforms. This is 94.3 Radio 1.
94.3. This is Drive Mumbai with Erica.
Let's go sun chasing next with Anuradha Goyal. She's an author, she's a blogger, she's a podcaster, and much more. And she shares her travel stories with us this evening. This is a very interesting podcast. I noticed you spoke about water, our heritage of water, and how it's so deeply rooted in the culture of Rajasthan. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I spoke to Neeraj Doshi, who conducts these water heritage walks in Jaipur. And I have been to a lot of places across India, which is something that I'm going to write about in my forthcoming book, or I've already written. It should be out in a couple of months. Water is integral to human life. That's why we see all our settlements on the banks of rivers. That's why we see so many ponds in all our ancient places, including Indus Valley civilization sites. Rajasthan is a desert, and it's the most densely populated desert in the world. In terms of deserts. Now, it's an interesting study of how come you have so many people living in a desert peacefully, prosperity. And the fact is that they knew how to tame the water, how to save every drop of water they received, either by way of the scanty rainfall that they have, or by way of the moisture that the sand could absorb, or the underground water. So very interestingly, he talks about 3 types of water. The Swarg water, which is the water that comes from the heavens, which is the rainwater.
Right.
Then there is Patal water, which is underground, which is below the ground.
Right.
And then there is a Dharti ka pani, which is the water that the sand absorbs, and then they have figured out a technique to take it out from the sand.
Wow. Okay. This is fascinating.
Right. Yes, it is absolutely fascinating, and the different types of water bodies to collect water, to save water, to distribute water. It's absolutely fascinating. It's not just heritage, it's engineering, it's architecture, it's water management, and it's the need of the hour. Mandu is another place that I have visited which has a fascinating water management system. If you visited Mandu, it's a city in its heydays. It was one of the most densely populated cities in the world, and it is situated on a tabletop mountain which has zero source of groundwater. All the water that it receives is from the rainfall. And if you look at the city, the whole city is designed around collecting water. So whether it's a palace of a queen, whether it's a guard's watchtower, or whether it's a playground, whether it's a temple, everything is designed to collect water.
That's Anuradha Goyal from IndiTales.com. That's a blog, and for her podcast, it's called Detours with Anuradha Goyal. Please check it out on all major streaming podcasting platforms. This is 94.3 Radio 1. So we know you've been keeping yourself really busy, and there's a book out, a little bit about it, and where we can get a hold of it.
So we published our first ebook. In fact, it's a book which is available both in English and Hindi. It's called Unusual Temples of India, and in Hindi it's called Bharat Ke Anokhe Mandir. It talks about 15 very unusual temples. Either the deity is very unusual, or the practices are very unusual, or something which you don't see normally at temples or anywhere else. So each of the story is a fascinating story from a different corner of India. So do check it out. It's available on Amazon worldwide.
I do hope you enjoy that. You can catch a podcast. It's called Detours with Anuradha Goyal. This is Drive Mumbai.